In 2026, you've probably noticed this too. The places that used to always be there don't feel so certain anymore. One store shuts down, one storefront sits empty, one familiar name shows up in the news for cutting back operations or closing hundreds more locations. 12 retailers are collapsing right in front of us. And what stands out is that many names on today's list are not strange brands nobody knows. These are places many of us have walked into for years, on the way to work, on the way home, during weekend shopping trips, names that once made us feel like they would always be around. But that is starting to change. Number 12, Tops Friendly Markets. People can put off buying a new chair, they can put off buying clothes, they can put off a lot of other spending, but there is one thing they still have to buy next week: food. And that is what makes the story of Tops Friendly Markets worth paying attention to, because this is not a brand selling luxury items. It is not a store living off a trend. This is a supermarket chain, a place tied to the things families still need to buy week after week. And yet, for years now, Tops has kept struggling under growing pressure. That is the part people can see. The more troubling part is somewhere else. Usually, when a retailer is in trouble, someone still sees an opportunity: an investor, a rival, a larger company that wants to buy it and try to turn things around. Because in retail, comebacks are not rare, but that is not the feeling Tops is giving off. There are not many signs that people are lining up for the chance to take over. There is no sense that this is a business everyone wants to bet on for the future. And that is what worries people, because customers were not the first ones to lose faith in Tops. The people who could save it may have been the ones walking away first. Think about that for a second. This is a grocery chain, a category where people still spend money every week, whether the economy is good or bad. And yet fewer and fewer people seem to believe this company's future is worth betting on. And maybe that is the most worrying part. Not that Tops is struggling, but that fewer people believe it can come back. Number 11, Big Lots. There was a time when, as everything started getting more expensive, people would turn to Big Lots, not to spend more money, but to save it. A cheap chair, a new lamp, a small item that made the house feel a little less worn down. These were not big purchases, but they were enough to make life feel a little easier. That was the kind of customer that helped Big Lots survive for years. But what is happening now is different. Many families are no longer trying to buy those things for less. They are skipping them completely. The old chair still works. The table is not fully broken yet. The bookshelf can wait a few more months. Not because they do not want to buy, but because they are trying to stretch the life of everything they already own. And when millions of families make those same decisions, stores like Big Lots start to feel it. What makes this story stand out is that Big Lots was built for hard times, when people start cutting back, when everyone is hunting for deals, when household budgets get tighter. That should have been the right environment for Big Lots. But even that does not seem to be enough anymore, because the problem now is not just price. More and more people are putting most of their budget toward the things they have no choice but to buy: food, rent, utilities, gas, insurance. And the items that used to sit on the buy later list are starting to disappear from that list completely. That is why Big Lots is in today's video. Not because people suddenly hate discount stores, but because more and more people are not buying those items at all anymore. And if even a retailer built around helping people save money is struggling, then maybe the story is no longer just about Big Lots. Number 10, Rite Aid. Some stores close and most people simply go somewhere else, but Rite Aid is not like that. For many people, this is where they still go every month to pick up prescriptions, where they buy cold medicine when they start feeling sick, where they go when they need something health-related and do not want to wait. And that is why what is happening to Rite Aid feels different. In a short period of time, location after location has disappeared. Doors that used to open every day are now closed. Familiar signs are slowly disappearing from communities across the country. What makes this story different from many other retailers is what Rite Aid actually represents. This is not where people go to buy something for fun, not where people stop in because of a sale. This is where older people pick up blood pressure medication, where diabetic patients get their monthly prescriptions, where parents buy cough syrup when their child starts running a fever at night. Those are very normal things until that place is no longer there. When a clothing store closes, people may feel sorry to see it go. When a pharmacy closes, it is usually very different, especially for people who are used to the same pharmacy counter, the same pharmacist, the same route every month for years. And that is the part many people do not think about. When a pharmacy closes, people do not just lose a store. They lose part of the support system they have been used to relying on for years. Some people only realize how much they depended on that place once it is gone. And maybe that is what makes Rite Aid's story more sobering than most bankruptcies, because this is not an outdated fashion brand, not a trend that ran its course. This is a business tied to some of the most basic needs of everyday life. And if even places like that are disappearing from more and more communities, then maybe the story is no longer just about Rite Aid. Number 9, Family Dollar. Some stores are built for people who want to save money. Family Dollar was built for people who did not have many choices to begin with. That is where many families go when the budget is already stretched. A carton of milk, a pack of diapers, a bottle of laundry detergent, very normal items. But for many people, even their price still has to be weighed carefully. That is why Family Dollar became a familiar part of many communities for years, not because people liked shopping there more, but because they needed a place they could afford. But what is happening now is making people pay attention. More and more Family Dollar stores are disappearing. And what is worth thinking about is that this story often says more about the customers than the company itself. Because Family Dollar exists, because millions of people cannot easily switch to more expensive options. They are not choosing between a better store and a cheaper store. Sometimes they're just trying to make the money left over last until the end of the month. That is the difference. When a high-end store struggles, people can say tastes changed. When a fashion brand struggles, people can say trends changed. But when a chain serving people on tight budgets starts struggling, the story usually becomes much bigger because Family Dollar's customers were already counting every dollar before every purchase. They were already looking for cheaper options. They were already living with very little financial room. And when even that group of customers feels more pressure than before, it is often a sign that the last cushion is starting to disappear. Maybe that is the most important part. Family Dollar does not exist to help people save more. It exists to help many people afford the things they need. And when a place like that starts struggling, the story is no longer just about Family Dollar itself. It shows what is happening to people who were already struggling long before this company started sliding. Number 8, Kohl's. If someone asked what makes Kohl's different from other retailers today, could you answer right away? That is exactly the problem. Kohl's is still there. It still has stores. It still has customers. It still sells clothing, shoes, and home goods like it has for years. But it is getting harder to say exactly what makes this brand special. For years, Kohl's has kept trying to adapt to a shopping world that is changing very fast. But for many customers, the feeling around the brand has become more and more blurry. It is not the cheapest option, not the most upscale option, not the first place people think of when they think about fashion, and not the first place they think of when they need something for the home. That is a very difficult position because customers today have too many choices. If they want low prices, there are cheaper places. If they want brands, there are stronger places. If they want convenience, they can buy online in just a few minutes. And little by little, Kohl's has started getting stuck in the middle. That is where a lot of brands have gotten into trouble. Not because they do everything terribly, but because they no longer give customers a clear enough reason to choose them. What is worth thinking about is that this is not just Kohl's story. A lot of businesses can survive periods of falling sales. They can survive hard years, but it is much harder when the brand itself starts becoming unclear, when customers still know your name, but they no longer know why they should remember you. And that may be one of the most dangerous problems a retailer can face, because sometimes a brand does not start weakening when it loses customers. It starts weakening when it no longer knows what makes it different. Number 7, Walgreens. How does a company that once built its success by being everywhere have to start shrinking that same network? That is the question Walgreens is facing. For years, every new store was a sign of growth. Another location, more customers, more revenue, more presence in the daily lives of millions of people. That is how Walgreens became one of the most familiar names in retail and healthcare. But that equation is no longer as simple as it used to be. Walgreens still has thousands of stores across the country, but the company has announced plans in recent years to close hundreds of underperforming locations, a decision that once would have been hard to imagine for a business built on the idea that being in more places was always better. What stands out is that the demand has not disappeared. People still need medication. They still need healthcare products. They still need the things Walgreens has sold for decades. But the world around those stores has changed. Customers shop differently. The cost of keeping each location open has gone up, and being on every corner is no longer the automatic advantage it once was. That is a very big shift, because for years, size almost meant strength. The more stores a brand had, the more successful it looked. Today, every store is not just a sales opportunity, it is also a cost that has to be carried every single day. And when a company has thousands of locations, those pressures start multiplying very quickly. Maybe that is the most important part of the Walgreens story. The thing that once helped the company rise to the top is now the thing it has to cut back in order to survive. There was a time when opening more stores was how a company became stronger. Today, for Walgreens, closing stores is becoming part of the survival strategy. Number 6, Dollar Tree. What is left of a brand when its biggest promise starts becoming harder to keep? Dollar Tree used to be one of the easiest names to understand in retail. You saw the name, and you almost knew exactly what you were going to get. A place where your money could stretch a little further, a place where people could walk in on a tight budget and still feel like they came out with quite a bit. That is why millions of people loved Dollar Tree for years. Everything was simple. Not much thinking required. Not too much math involved. But then that simplicity started to change. And many customers noticed it before they ever read a report. They looked at the shelves, looked at the prices, and realized things were not the same anymore. This is not just a story about a few items getting more expensive. It is a story about a brand built around a very specific promise. A promise that is harder to keep today than ever before. What makes this worth thinking about is that people are still looking for low prices, maybe more than before. The pressure from the cost of living has not gone away. Household budgets are still stretched. The need to save is still there, but more and more people feel like the money they spend does not go as far as it used to. And that is a very different feeling, because Dollar Tree does not just sell products, it sells the feeling that a tight budget can still work. So when that feeling starts to weaken, the challenge is no longer just about prices. It starts touching the very thing that gave this brand its identity. And maybe that is the hardest fight Dollar Tree is facing, because a company can change a lot of things, but it is very hard when the thing that starts changing is the promise that made your name matter. Number 5, Macy's. There was a time when getting ready for a special occasion almost always started the same way. Driving to the mall, walking through crowded hallways, and stepping into Macy's. For millions of families, that was not just shopping, it was part of the routine. Back to school season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, or just a weekend out with the family. That is why Macy's story carries a very different feeling from many other retailers on this list, because what is changing is not just a brand, it is a habit that existed in many people's lives for years. Today, so much has become faster. A few clicks, one order, a delivery right to the front door, and little by little, trips to the mall no longer hold the place they once did. That creates pressure not only for Macy's, but for the entire model that helped this company grow for decades. Because Macy's has always been seen as one of the main destinations inside the mall. When mall traffic falls, names like Macy's usually feel it very clearly. But maybe the most important part is not sales or store count. It is the change in how we shop. More and more people no longer see going to the mall as a weekend activity. They no longer see it as a place to walk around, meet people, or spend a few hours with family. And when that habit slowly disappears, the businesses built around it start changing too. Maybe that is Macy's biggest challenge, not competing with one specific rival, but adapting to a world where the habits that once helped it grow are slowly fading away. Because sometimes a business does not weaken because it did something wrong. It weakens because its customers' lives changed. Number four, Penney. Not every customer is the same. Some customers stop in once and disappear, but others stay with a brand for decades. JCPenney was once built around people like that. For many middle-class families, it was a familiar part of life. Buying clothes for the new school year, buying gifts for the holidays, buying things the family needed without having to think too hard. It was not the fanciest store, not the trendiest place, but it was reliable. And in retail, that used to mean a lot. The problem is that relationships like that cannot be created overnight. They are built over years, even decades, and that is also why they are so hard to replace. Today, many customers who grew up with JCPenney no longer shop the way they used to, while younger shoppers have endless choices that older generations never had. They discover brands differently, compare prices differently, and build completely different shopping habits. That is a challenge very few businesses know how to solve. Because you can change the products, you can change the stores, you can change the strategy, but it is not easy to replace decades of trust that one generation of customers gave you. Maybe that is the most important part of the JCPenney story. This is not just a story about sales or store count. This is a story about what happens when a brand slowly loses the customers who help turn it into an icon. Because sometimes a business does not weaken because it loses its best product. It weakens because it loses the people who stayed with it the longest. Number three, Sears. Some companies struggle and it surprises people. And then there are companies people once believed would always exist. Sears belongs to the second group. For years, Sears was so big that it was hard to imagine what the country would look like without it. For millions of families, this was not just a place to shop. This was where they bought clothes for their kids, a new washing machine, tools to fix the house, and so many other things for everyday life. Sears was so present in people's lives that it became something everyone took for granted. That is what makes this story different from so many other brands, because when a small company disappears, people usually are not shocked. But when a name that dominated retail for decades starts vanishing, the first reaction is usually, how could that even happen? And yet it did happen. One store closed, then another location disappeared, then another piece of an empire slowly got smaller. Not overnight, but over many years. Maybe that is why the Sears story is still talked about today. It is not just a story about a failed business. It is a reminder that size is not a guarantee. History is not a guarantee. Familiarity is not a guarantee. Because the world keeps changing, no matter how big a brand is. And when it fails to keep up with those changes, even names that once seemed unbeatable can become more fragile than anyone imagined. Maybe that is what Sears represents today. Not success, but one simple truth. Something that once seemed impossible to lose can still disappear. Number two, CVS. Sometimes a business does not struggle because it grew too slowly, but because it tried to become too many things at once. CVS is a perfect example. For many people, this used to simply be the place to pick up prescriptions, a familiar stop on the way home, a place they knew they could walk into when they needed something health-related. But over time, CVS no longer wanted to be just a pharmacy. The company expanded into clinics, healthcare services, insurance, and many other areas. For years, that was seen as the future. More services, more customers, more chances to grow, but the more it expanded, the more complicated everything became. At some point, the challenge was no longer how to grow faster. It was how to make everything it had built still work well together. That is where the pressure started to show. CVS is still one of the biggest names in healthcare and retail. It still serves millions of people every day, but at the same time, it is also facing bigger and bigger changes from the market and from the very size it created. What makes this story worth thinking about is that CVS is no longer fighting to become bigger. It is fighting to manage what it already built. And that is a completely different kind of pressure because building an empire is hard. Keeping it running is often even harder. CVS spent years becoming more than a pharmacy, and now that very thing is becoming one of the hardest problems it has to solve. Number one, Walmart. For many people, Walmart is not just a store. It is where they buy groceries, buy medicine, buy things for the house, buy almost everything they need in one trip. That is why Walmart has always carried a very different feeling, not because it is perfect, but because it has always seemed stable. Full shelves, crowded parking lots, people coming and going nonstop. That has been a familiar image for millions of people for years. But even Walmart is changing. The company is still the largest retailer in the country. It still serves millions of customers every day. But at the same time, it is also closing underperforming locations and adjusting how it operates to adapt to a new environment. What stands out is that Walmart is not struggling because it lacks customers. People still need food. They still need everyday essentials. Those needs have not disappeared, but costs are changing. Shopping behavior is changing, and customer expectations are changing. Even the strongest business cannot stand outside those changes. Maybe that is why Walmart takes the number one spot today, because Walmart has long been seen as a symbol of stability in American retail. And when even a business like that has to adjust to survive, that is often a sign that bigger changes are happening. Conclusion. After all of this, maybe the most important thing is not any single name on today's list, because each name is only reflecting one part of the same story. Some are losing customers, some are losing their identity, some are losing the advantages that once helped them grow. But what they all have in common is that they are all trying to adapt to a changing country. Brands that once seemed like they would always be around, places many people have visited for decades. Today, they all have to change in order to survive, because sometimes the biggest sign of change is not what new thing appears. It is what used to always be there, but is slowly disappearing. And I am curious about this. Out of all the names today, which store have you visited the most in your life? And which name would you miss the most if it disappeared completely? Share it in the comments below. And if you enjoy real-world breakdowns like this, do not forget to subscribe so you do not miss the next videos.